When I got the acceptance email for the summer internship at Strickland & Company, one of the most competitive firms in the city, I thought my life had finally started making sense. My name is Olivia Marsh, I was 22, a senior in college, and everything I had been working toward seemed to be falling into place. The position promised incredible networking opportunities, real experience, and possibly even a full-time offer after graduation. But what I didn't realize then was that it would also be the thing that shattered my relationship and forced me to question who I could trust. I had been with Ethan Carver, my boyfriend, for almost 3 years. We met in sophomore year during a campus volunteering project, and he had been my safe place ever since. Ethan was steady, kind, the type who brought you soup when you were sick and remembered little details like the exact way you liked your coffee. He was also cautious by nature, and though he was proud of me, I could tell the idea of me working at a high-profile firm made him uneasy. "Just don't get too caught up in all that big city, corporate nonsense," he said the night I told him. His tone was light, but his eyes betrayed worry. I laughed it off. "It's just an internship, Ethan. It doesn't change us." The first day at Strickland was overwhelming. The office itself was sleek, all glass walls and sharp lines, and the pace was unlike anything I'd experienced. My assigned mentor was Julian Mercer, a mid-level associate known for his charisma and ability to win clients over. He was only in his late 20s but already carried himself like he owned the place. Julian had that effortless confidence, the kind that made people gravitate toward him, and he seemed genuinely interested in helping me learn. "Olivia, right," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I looked over your resume. Impressive. Let's make sure this summer is worth your time." At first, I was flattered by the attention. He gave me challenging tasks instead of busy work and treated me like I belonged there. But it didn't take long for Ethan to notice changes. "You've been coming home late every night," he remarked one evening as I dropped my bag by the door. "Do they really expect interns to work 12-hour days?" I hesitated, not wanting to admit that part of why I stayed late was because Julian often asked me to review things with him after hours. It never felt inappropriate, at least not then. It felt like mentorship. "They just have a lot going on right now," I explained. "I can handle it." Ethan nodded, but the look on his face told me he wasn't convinced. As the weeks went on, Julian's praise grew more personal. He'd say things like, "You have more potential than half the associates here," or "You're wasted at a college internship, you should be running projects." His words lit a fire in me, but they also created distance between Ethan and me. Where Ethan urged caution, Julian encouraged ambition. The real turning point came one Friday night. I had promised Ethan we'd have dinner together, but at 7:30 Julian stopped by my cubicle with a file in his hand. "I need you to help me prep for Monday's presentation." "It won't take long," he said with that charming smile that made it hard to say no. I texted Ethan, running late. Rain check, and stayed until almost midnight. When I got home, Ethan was waiting. The untouched takeout containers on the table and the way he didn't look up as I walked in told me everything. "Olivia, do you even see what's happening?" His voice was steady but low, the way it got when he was holding back anger. "You've missed 3 dates this week. You're always glued to your phone. And every time I ask about it, it's Julian this, Julian that." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but for once I had no good answer. He wasn't wrong. "I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong," Ethan continued, finally meeting my eyes. "But he's taking up all the space that used to be ours." I should have reassured him then, but instead, I found myself saying, "This internship is important, Ethan. It's not forever. Why can't you just support me?" The words hung in the air like a blade. I could see how much they hurt him, but I also knew I meant them. That night, he slept on the couch. And for the first time, I wondered if something I had worked so hard for could actually cost me something I never thought I'd lose. But that was just the beginning. I didn't know yet how deep Julian's influence would go, or how much I'd discover about him, myself, and Ethan before the summer ended. The following week at Strickland only deepened the rift between Ethan and me. Julian Mercer had a way of pulling me further into his orbit without me even noticing. He'd lean over my desk to check a document, close enough that I caught the subtle notes of his cologne, or he'd send me late-night emails with the subject line "quick thought" that turned into hour-long exchanges. He made me feel like I was part of something bigger, like he trusted me with insights no one else got. It was intoxicating. Ethan, however, saw things differently. "Do you realize you've cancelled on me 6 times in the last 2 weeks?" he asked one Saturday morning, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had rehearsed this conversation in his head too many times. I set my coffee cup down, bracing myself. "It's temporary, Ethan. You know that." He shook his head slowly. "Temporary or not, it feels like I don't exist to you anymore unless I'm competing with Julian." The way he said Julian's name made it sound like a curse. I wanted to protest, to remind him that I wasn't doing anything wrong, but deep down, I couldn't deny the thrill I felt when Julian singled me out. That night, Ethan suggested we take a break. My heart clenched. "Are you breaking up with me?" I asked, my voice catching. He sighed. "No. I need space. I need to know if we're still us, or if you've already moved on without even realizing it." His words haunted me, but instead of pulling away from Julian, I threw myself deeper into the internship, telling myself I had to make it worthwhile if it was going to cost me this much. A few days later, Julian invited me to join him at a networking dinner. "It'll be good exposure for you," he said casually, but the sparkle in his eye hinted at something else. I hesitated, thinking about Ethan, then rationalized it as just work. At the dinner, surrounded by powerful attorneys and ambitious interns, Julian made sure I was always part of the conversation. "Olivia here has a sharp eye for detail," he said proudly, as if I were already his protégé. My cheeks warmed under the praise. Later that night, as he drove me home, he said, "You know, most people in this firm don't see what you're capable of. But I do. Don't let anyone hold you back, Olivia." His words landed like an arrow. He didn't say Ethan's name, but I felt the implication. When I got home, Ethan wasn't there. He'd gone to stay with a friend for the weekend. The empty apartment felt colder than usual, and though part of me wanted to call him, another part whispered that maybe this distance was inevitable. Weeks passed, and the tension only grew. Ethan and I saw each other less and less, and when we did, our conversations felt like battles fought on a minefield. Meanwhile, Julian kept finding ways to blur the line between mentorship and something more. One evening, after another long day, I found myself in Julian's office going over a presentation. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie, and said, "You've got this instinct, Olivia. It's rare. I don't see it often." His gaze lingered on me a beat too long, and I felt my pulse quicken. I looked away, telling myself it was nothing, but the truth was, I wasn't so sure anymore. Then came the night everything shifted. We had a huge client presentation the next morning, and Julian asked me to stay late to help polish the slides. Hours passed, and by the time we wrapped up, the office was deserted. As I gathered my things, Julian said softly, "You know, I don't think you realize how much I rely on you. You're not just another intern to me." The air between us grew heavy, and for a split second, I thought he might close the distance. My stomach flipped, half with fear, half with something else. But before anything could happen, I forced a laugh and said, "Well, I'm glad I'm useful." He smiled, but his eyes told a different story. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. What scared me most wasn't Julian's words, it was how much part of me had wanted him to say more. Ethan called the next day, his voice strained. "Olivia, I don't know if I can keep doing this. You're slipping away from me, and I can't pretend I don't see it." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that we'd be okay, but I knew deep down the balance had already shifted. I was standing on a cliff's edge, torn between the life I'd built with Ethan and the future Julian dangled in front of me. And the worst part was, I had no idea which one I actually wanted. By mid-July, the internship had become my entire world, and somewhere along the way Ethan had stopped being a part of it. We still texted here and there, but the warmth was gone, replaced by clipped updates and awkward silences. Julian Mercer, on the other hand, seemed to fill every empty space in my days. He was magnetic in a way that made people lean in without realizing, and I wasn't immune. I told myself it was just admiration, but deep down I knew it was becoming something else. The firm announced a major project that all the associates were scrambling to join, and to my shock Julian recommended me to be on the team. "She's sharp," he told the partners in front of everyone, his voice confident, leaving no room for argument. My chest swelled with pride, and I noticed a few of the other interns shooting me jealous looks. That night I tried to call Ethan to share the news, but the call went straight to voicemail. When he texted me hours later, all he wrote was, "Congrats. I guess Julian's really looking out for you." The passive aggression stung, but I ignored it. The project meant late nights, and late nights meant more time with Julian. One evening, after we finally wrapped up a grueling review session, Julian suggested we grab a drink to celebrate. My first instinct was to say no, but the way he looked at me made it hard to refuse. At the bar, he loosened up in a way I hadn't seen before. He told me stories about his early days at the firm, about how cutthroat it had been, how he'd nearly quit before landing a major client that cemented his place. "You remind me of myself," he said, his gaze steady. "Hungry. Relentless. But also, holding back." My pulse quickened. "Holding back how?" I asked before I could stop myself. His lips curved into a half-smile. "You tell me." The air between us grew charged, and I suddenly became hyper-aware of the fact that we were alone, that Ethan hadn't spoken to me in days, that everything about this moment felt like a test. I excused myself before it went any further, but the ride home was torture. I couldn't stop wondering what might have happened if I hadn't left. A few days later, Ethan showed up at my apartment unannounced. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. "Olivia, I need to know the truth. Are you with him?" The question hit me like a blow. "Ethan, no, I'm not," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "But you want to be," he shot back, his voice breaking. I shook my head, but the silence that followed said everything. He finally whispered, "I don't even recognize you anymore." That night he left, and for the first time since we'd met, I didn't chase after him. The project at work consumed me even more, and Julian seemed to sense the shift. He started dropping by my desk just to chat, his compliments straying further from professional. "That color looks incredible on you," he said once, nodding toward my blouse. I blushed and told myself it was harmless, but my heart knew better. Then came the firm's summer gala, a glamorous event at a downtown hotel. All the interns were buzzing about it for weeks, and I spent hours picking out a dress. When I walked in, Julian found me almost instantly. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. The rest of the night felt like a blur of champagne, music, and Julian's presence always near, like a gravitational pull I couldn't escape. At one point, we stepped out onto the balcony to get some air. The city lights stretched out before us, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "You know," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it, "you could go so far here. But only if you stop letting people hold you back." I knew who he meant. I thought of Ethan, of the way he looked at me the last time we spoke, and guilt washed over me. But then Julian's hand brushed mine, just barely, and the guilt twisted into something else, something dangerous. I pulled my hand away, muttering something about needing more air, but the truth was I was terrified. Not of Julian, but of myself, and how close I was to stepping over a line I wasn't sure I could come back from. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed with a message from Ethan. It was only 5 words, I hope he's worth it. My chest ached, but I didn't respond. And that silence, I realized, might have been the loudest answer of all. The morning after the gala, I woke up with a pit in my stomach, replaying every second of the balcony moment, Julian's hand brushing mine, the way his eyes lingered a little too long, the way I hadn't exactly pushed him away until the last second. Ethan's message still sat unanswered on my phone, and for the first time, I didn't know what to say because I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. I threw myself into work, telling myself that burying my emotions would keep me safe, but Julian wasn't someone you could ignore. He knew how to read people, and with me, he always seemed one step ahead. A week later, after another 16-hour day, I found myself in his office again. The project had reached a critical stage, and we were frantically preparing for the client pitch. I leaned over his desk pointing out a correction, and when I looked up, his face was only inches from mine. For a moment we both froze, the room charged with tension, and then before I could think, he kissed me. It was brief, almost tentative, but it was enough to send shockwaves through my entire body. I pulled back instantly, breathless. Julian, but he cut me off. You don't have to explain. I know. The worst part was, I didn't even know if I wanted to stop him. That night I went home in a daze, my lips still tingling, my heart pounding with guilt. Ethan's sweater still hung on the back of a chair, a painful reminder of the life I was unraveling. I picked up my phone twice to call him but couldn't bring myself to dial. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness, but Julian made that impossible. He didn't apologize, didn't pretend it hadn't happened. Instead, he acted as though something between us had shifted, like the kiss had given him permission. He'd brush his hand against mine when handing me papers, his gaze would linger too long in meetings, and once, late at night, he leaned in so close I thought he'd kiss me again. And the truth was, part of me wanted him to. Meanwhile, Ethan grew more distant. He stopped calling altogether, and when I finally reached out, he answered with a clipped "What do you want, Olivia?" His voice was so cold it made my chest tighten. I want us, I whispered, though I wasn't even sure if that was true anymore. Then stop acting like you don't, he said, and hung up. The project deadline loomed, and with it, the pressure mounted. Julian and I practically lived in the office, and one night, after a particularly brutal day, we stayed to rehearse the pitch. I stumbled over a line, groaning in frustration, and Julian walked over, placing his hands gently on my shoulders. "You're overthinking," he said softly. His touch was steady, grounding, and before I knew it, he tilted my chin up and kissed me again, this time longer, deeper, more certain. I should have stopped him, should have pulled away, but instead, I let it happen. The dam had broken, and there was no denying it anymore. When I finally left the office that night, the weight of what I had done crashed over me. I had crossed the line. Ethan's face haunted me, the way he used to look at me with such trust, and now that trust was shattered, whether he knew it or not. But mixed with the guilt was another feeling, excitement, possibility, the sense that maybe Julian was right, maybe I had been holding myself back all along. The day of the client pitch arrived, and Julian and I nailed it. The partners praised our work, the clients were impressed, and I should have felt triumphant. Instead, as the applause echoed in the conference room, I caught Julian's satisfied smile and felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Was I proud of what I'd accomplished, or was I just drunk on the validation he gave me? That night I returned to my apartment to find Ethan waiting by the door. His eyes were hard, his jaw tight, and in his hand he held something that made my blood run cold, my notebook from work. "You left this in your bag when you were at my place last week," he said flatly. I looked through it. And I saw the notes. The late nights. The dinners. The gala. He took a step closer. "Just tell me, Olivia. Are you with him?" My throat went dry. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but the silence stretched too long, and I saw the truth register in his eyes. He let out a hollow laugh. "You don't even have to say it. I already know. He turned to leave, and panic surged through me. Ethan, wait. I called after him, but he didn't stop. The door slammed, and the sound reverberated through me like a final judgment. I sank to the floor, my chest heaving, realizing that in chasing ambition, in letting Julian pull me closer, I might have destroyed the one thing that truly mattered. But even as the guilt consumed me, another thought crept in. Was it already too late to turn back, or had I just taken my first step into a future I couldn't undo? The days after Ethan walked out were some of the darkest I had ever faced. I tried throwing myself into work, but even the victories felt hollow. Julian Mercer seemed to sense something was off, though he never asked directly. Instead, he acted like nothing had changed, like our stolen moments, the kisses, and the wreckage of my relationship were all just part of the natural order. For a while, I almost let myself believe him. After all, the project we had worked on was a success. Partners were starting to notice me. I wasn't just another intern anymore, I was Olivia Marsh, the girl Julian Mercer had taken under his wing. But the higher I climbed, the more uneasy I felt. Every time Julian brushed against me in the hallway or gave me that knowing smile, a part of me wondered if I was just another one of his experiments, a pawn in whatever game he liked to play with people who admired him. One evening, he invited me to dinner under the guise of celebrating our success. We met at a sleek rooftop restaurant, the city glittering below us, and for a while I let myself get swept up in the fantasy. He ordered wine without asking, leaned in close as we talked, and made me feel like I was the only person in the world. But somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, I noticed the way he glanced at his phone, the half-smirk that crossed his lips as he typed something quickly before sliding it back into his pocket. I asked who it was, but he just shrugged. Work never stops, he said, though the look in his eyes told me it wasn't just business. That night, when he dropped me off, I didn't invite him in. For the first time, I felt the illusion crack, and it terrified me. 2 days later, I found out the truth. Another intern, Madison, pulled me aside after a meeting. Be careful with Julian, she whispered urgently. You're not the first intern he's taken an interest in. My stomach dropped. She told me about another woman who had been here last year, how things had gotten messy, and how Julian had walked away unscathed while her career fell apart. The warning rattled me to my core. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about Ethan, about the way he had looked at me with such disappointment, about how I had traded something real for something that now felt dangerously flimsy. I thought about Julian's words, how he always told me not to let anyone hold me back, but what if he was the one holding me in place, keeping me tethered to his orbit so I couldn't see the truth? The next day, I confronted him. How many? I asked bluntly in his office, shutting the door behind me. His brows furrowed. How many what? Interns, I said, my voice trembling. How many have you done this with? For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he leaned back in his chair, a smile tugging at his lips. Does it matter? You're different, Olivia Marsh. His casual tone made my blood boil. It matters to me, I snapped. Because I've already lost someone I loved because of you. He stood and walked toward me, his confidence radiating as always. No, Olivia. You lost him because you wanted more. I just gave you permission to admit it. I recoiled, suddenly seeing him for what he really was, not a mentor, not a partner, but a manipulator who thrived on ambition and vulnerability. I'm done, I said, my voice firm. He tilted his head, amused. You'll regret that. This world isn't kind to people who burn bridges. But for the first time in months, I felt clarity. I gathered my things that evening and decided to walk away, not just from Julian but from the entire internship. It wasn't worth the cost anymore. The next few weeks were brutal. I reached out to Ethan once, just once, to apologize. He listened quietly as I stumbled through my words, tears streaming down my face. When I finished, he sighed. I hope you find what you're looking for, Olivia Marsh. But I can't go back there with you. His voice was calm, final, and I knew then that I had lost him for good. Time passed, and eventually I found another internship, one that didn't carry the same glamour or prestige but gave me the space to breathe. I rebuilt slowly, piece by piece, learning the hard way that success without integrity was just another form of failure. Sometimes I still think about Julian, about the way he made me feel like I could conquer the world, and I shudder. Because now I know that what he offered wasn't mentorship or opportunity, it was a trap disguised as validation. And I think about Ethan too, about how easily I let him slip away, and I wonder if ambition blinded me to the only thing that ever really mattered. In the end, the internship that cost me my relationship wasn't just a chapter of my life, it was the lesson that taught me some victories aren't worth winning.